It should be no surprise to anyone that the United States military has emitted over 1 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases since the beginning of the global war on terrorism back in 2001. This is according to a report from Brown University's Costs of War project. Now, it is equivalent to the annual emissions of 257 million passenger cars, which the report notes is more than double the current number of cars on the road in the United States alone. With over 800 military bases in more than 80 countries across the globe, the Pentagon remains the world's largest institutional user of petroleum and producer of greenhouse gases. The Pentagon is not transparent, of course, when it comes to fuel consumption or greenhouse gas emissions. Why would they want to be? However, the project used the Department of Energy's emissions data for the report's estimates, which it stated in 2017 the Pentagon's greenhouse gas emissions were about 59 million metric tons. That same year, this was more than Finland, which was 46.8 million metric tons, Sweden's 50.8, and Denmark's 33.5 million metric tons. At least 400 million metric tons of greenhouse gases are a result of consumption in war zones such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and also in Syria. According to the report, from 1998 up to 2017, the United States purchased 2.4 billion barrels of petroleum fuel. Since the 9/11 attacks, annual fuel purchases have averaged more than 120 million barrels of all types of fuel. Between 2010 and 2015, the armed services purchased an average of 102 million barrels of fuel per year for the DoD. It is also estimated that the Pentagon consumed more than 85 million barrels of operational fuel in order to help power its fleets of ships, aircraft, and other combat vehicles. They also used the fuel for contingency bases. Now, in total, it was $8.2 billion spent. Since 2001, the Pentagon has also consistently consumed between 77 and 80% of all United States government energy consumption. The report notes not just half, more than 70%. Installations that support operations as well as military non-armored vehicles are notorious in their guzzling of fuel. There are apparently 60,000 Humvees that remain in the United States Army's fleet, which they go about 4 to 8 miles per gallon of diesel fuel, which is not good if you know. Now, domestic and overseas military installations account for about only 4% of the Pentagon's greenhouse emissions. The report briefly details how jet fuel is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions when looking at the U.S. military. Aircraft are responsible for hundreds of tons of CO2. Wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have involved massive airstrikes, and materials were flown to set up bases for those occupations alone. Similarly, the United States war against ISIS in Syria and Iraq, which began in August of 2014, has entailed tens of thousands of aircraft sorties from various missions, from recon to airlift to refueling and weapon strikes. A B-2 bomber on the mission from Whitman Air Force Base in Missouri might be refueled many times. Now, the project cites the following example from January 18th of 2017. Two B-2 bombers accompanied by 15 K-135 and K-10 aerial refuelers made a 30-hour round trip from the Whitman Air Force Base to Libya to drop bombs on ISIS targets in Libya. As the report mentions, the project did not account for the emissions caused by the burning of oil by sabotage or the destruction of oil infrastructure, nor did it even account for the energy consumed in the process of reconstruction efforts or even the impact of deforestation. Again, why would they take this into account? Because they won't. In Afghanistan, war caused immigration, illegal lodging to appear to be the chief cause of deforestation. Now, the cause of deforestation in Iraq are complex but include war. Now, while the United States military has plenty of resources to move to renewable energy, it has remained dependent on petroleum, which is a boon for the oil and gas industry, who many know this is who our troops are over there fighting for. Switches to renewable power generation between 2011 and 2015 have only offset less than 1%, just 1% of the Pentagon's greenhouse emissions. The closure of U.S. military bases, in addition to the end of wars, would go a long way towards diminishing the United States government's gigantic carbon footprint we have. Any plan to address climate change should contemplate demilitarization, given what is outlined in the report alone. As Alice Slater, the New York director of Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, wrote for The Nation, United States military bases are not only responsible for such massive amounts of greenhouse emissions, but also devastating impacts caused by pollutants and the toxic weapons. From Agent Orange in Vietnam, depleted uranium in Iraq, ammunition dumps, and firing ranges in Puerto Rico, to a toxic brew of poisons along the Panama River. Communities and soldiers, as well as children born subsequent to the exposure of these toxins, are suffering a broad range of illnesses, which are inherited genetic damage, while the United States government ducks any accountability for the harm caused by its mindless dumping and reckless burial of untreated toxic military waste, Slater described. Countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia that have been impacted the most have been largely unable to convince or pressure the United States military into funding cleanup projects in their areas. When one adds the toxic effects of U.S. military bases to the enormous amount of emissions over the past couple decades, it becomes very clear that a climate plan should include climate reparations for the affected countries, because in the end, those third world countries, the coastal cities, and those surrounded by glaciers, those are the people that are going to see the effects the fastest. Those that are already seeing the droughts, those that are seeing the extreme temperature rises, the mass flooding we are seeing across the globe. DC's underwater. We had Missouri underwater. It's not getting any better, and the United States military should be looking at going. Not, it's a joke that it's just even at 1% of renewable energy it uses. The U.S. military should be working forward to be. Again, I know it's not going to happen because we understand that we are fighting for the oil industry over there. So seeing the U.S. military switch to renewables, again, that's something starting at the root of the problem, where we have to get money out of politics, and then we can address the wars that are being fueled and funded by military contractors and oil investors. But that's all I have for you guys on this story. It's fucked up. The United States military is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases and climate change in all, along with other pollution of just toxic dumping. That's all for this video. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed what I talked about. Now, if you'd like to support the show, well, just remember you can visit the Patreon link below in the description and become a $3 or $5 monthly donor to the channel. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, this has been your Daily Ember.